Amazing call reveals poor waitress's unexpected encounter with a mafia boss's unconscious son. The clang of silverware and the hum of conversation filled the diner, but Grace's world narrowed to the phone ringing, an urgent, electrifying call that disrupted her well-rehearsed routine. She answered breathlessly, her heart fluttering. It was the bakery down the street. "We need a birthday cake delivered to the hospital. It's for Michael, the mafia boss's son," the voice crackled with tension. Her pulse quickened. She knew who Michael was and the stories surrounding him, tales of power, danger, and a life far removed from her own. Could she really step into that world? As she hung up, adrenaline surged and doubt crept in with it. Delivering a cake felt absurd, a choice that threatened her already precarious balance between responsibility and the unyielding dream of a better life. Tommy, her 12-year-old brother, awaited her at home, his innocence a stark contrast to the chaos looming in her thoughts. But could this cake delivery bridge the gap to a fortune that could change their lives forever? Could she scoop them up out of poverty with the very cake meant for someone wrapped in the Mafia's gilded embrace? "Grace, you okay?" Susan, her co-worker, peered at her through the busy diner, and for a moment, Grace couldn't reveal her turmoil. "How do you articulate the choice of risking everything for a fleeting chance?" "Yeah, just contemplating," she admitted, her voice a whisper over the clatter of plates. The smirk of the farmers and locals who frequented the diner felt heavy, a reminder of how deeply rooted she was in their mundane reality. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Mounting pressure transformed her thoughts into a tempest. What would she gain from becoming entangled with Michael's world? The bite of survival urged her forward to the hospital. Staring at the sterile white walls, she felt a shiver of isolation amid the world of wealth and danger. As she stood before Michael's room, she hesitated, her fingers shaking on the cake box. What if she recognized a darkness that wasn't her own? Pushing through, she entered. On the bedside table, the cake shimmered in contrast to Michael's battered form. His perfect face, marred by bruises and unconsciousness, transcended the stories of wealth, invoking a visceral ache within her. Guilt washed over her. Here was a soul caught in chains beyond what money could appease. Would it be exploitative to linger by his side, peering into the abyss of his life? She felt a twisted kinship, a desire to save the boy, spiraling alongside her yearning to find something better. The pressure intensified, each breath was a tug-of-war between morality and ambition, but just as fear twisted around her fiercely beating heart, a shadow crossed the doorway, a figure looming, dressed in darkness. Her world shattered in that moment, clashing against the fleeting hope of a connection. The air thickened with tension, transporting her to a crossroads. Would she confront the truth about her father's past and the invisible threads binding their fates? Each choice danced with calamity, promising either liberation or loss. The storm brewing just beyond the hospital walls was only beginning. The figure in the doorway stepped forward, disrupting Grace's thoughts like a thunderclap. He was tall, clad in a tailored suit that screamed power and control, a look that radiated authority and danger. Behind the stoic expression lay an intricate facade of emotions that caused Grace to recoil instinctively. "Who are you?" Grace's voice came out steadier than she felt, anchored in the ground of her mounting turmoil. The man studied her, eyes narrowing as if gauging her worth. "Marco," he replied simply, the name sending a ripple of recognition through her. Marco, a name whispered in the diner's back booths, often in concert with tales of fear. It was a name that suggested connections, secrets, and the kind of violence that lurked in the shadows. Panic flared, yet awareness flickered inside her. Grace fought back the temptation to flee, aware that this encounter could alter her tightly woven destiny. Those stories she had heard, each one a warning, each slope of darkness a plausible future. But standing there, Facing Marco, she felt less like a girl from the diner and more like a player in a larger game. "You're here for the cake?" Marco asked, his voice smooth but edged with an ominous undertone. "Yeah," Grace replied, her response edged with a flurry of defiance. "And I deserve to know what happens next." The statement surprised even her. Was this the resolve she had harbored beneath layers of doubt? "Is that what you think?" Marco stepped closer, the shadow of his past hovering just miles away from the glimmer of her aspirations. "You think you want to be part of this?" He gestured toward the room, toward Michael lying helpless. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Deep within, Grace recognized this confrontation as a test not just of her courage, but of her purpose. Did she want to be entangled in this life? Could she risk everything for the false promise of a quick escape from her burdens? The chill filagreed her spine, illuminating a pathway of both desire and horror at what lay ahead. "I'm not looking for trouble," she replied, her newfound voice gaining strength. "But I'm tired of being invisible. I want a chance to change things for my brother and me." The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, casting a spotlight on her ambition, a rare admission of vulnerability driven by sheer necessity. Marco seemed to contemplate her reaction, the intensity of his scrutiny pressing against her. "Changing things, Grace, comes with a price. A dangerous one." The enormity of his words hit her like a gust of wind, and she realized she was standing on a precipice. It was a moment of choice filled with both dread and determination. Though fear wrapped around her guilt, exhilaration began to take root with the promise of action. The pain of watching her family struggle fueled a flicker of resolve. She could no longer let fear enslave her. "Then let me in," Grace found herself saying, a challenge in her voice. "If this is going to be my life's defining moment, I want a chance to shape it myself." Marco raised an eyebrow, curiosity mingling with intrigue. "Choose wisely. You'll become part of this world, whether you want to or not." As she looked past him into Michael's room, the stillness still palpable, her heart thudded with the awareness that she was standing at a defining crossroads. The storm wasn't just outside, it was inside, swirling between courage and caution. The next decision loomed giant in her mind, each ripple from Marco's presence pulling her further into the shadowy depths of the unknown. "Are you ready to find out what it truly means to live dangerously?" Those words echoed through her mind as she stepped closer, feeling the weight of fate clasp her shoulder. The doorway of opportunity remained ajar, pulsating with a mix of fear and exhilarating potential. Grace drew in a sharp breath, the air thickening around her as uncertainty battled her newfound determination. Standing face to face with Marco ignited an intensity within her that she hadn't known existed. With every passing second, the weight of their circumstances felt both oppressive and liberating. She found herself at a threshold, the future stretched beyond the doorway like an expansive horizon waiting to be painted with her choices. What was she truly willing to risk? The echo of Marco's question lingered in her thoughts, prodding deep-seated fears and aspirations alike. She had spent far too long lingering on the fringes, invisible amidst the chaos of her life, watching opportunities slip away while feeling paralyzed by her situation and obligations. "I want to help my brother," she insisted, her voice resolute despite the uncertainty swelling within her. The desperate instinct to protect Michael surged to the forefront. Every ounce of fear transformed into raw fuel for her ambition. She wasn't just doing this for herself anymore. Marco's eyes narrowed, contemplating her fervor. "Then understand this: once you step in, there's no turning back. We're not playing games here, Grace." His warning was clear, yet the thrill of adventure mixed with anxiety exhilarated her. Could she handle the truth behind the life he offered? With a nod that surprised herself, she took that irrevocable step forward. "Show me, Marco. I want to know what this world is really like." As soon as the words left her lips, their weight settled like a fine mist, swirling with possibilities. There was no going back, but there was certainly a great deal to gain. Marco's expression shifted, a flicker of approval dancing in his gaze. "Very well. I'll introduce you to the reality of this life, but you must tread lightly. This isn't just about ambition, it's about loyalty, choice, and sacrifices that could crush you. The thoroughness of his words resonated. Grace's mind was abuzz with a concoction of anxieties and aspirations as she sensed the gravity of those around her, especially Michael, and the leverage she could gain from standing alongside Marco. She pictured a new life, a different world where her presence could be powerful instead of powerless. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her heartbeat synchronizing with a desperate urgency. "Learn, observe, and when the time comes, act," Marco instructed, his voice steeped in authority. "It's not enough to want change, you must become the catalyst for it, even in the stacks of turbulent decisions you'll face." She nodded again, steeling herself against the storm brewing within. This was the moment of metamorphosis, where the girl who had dreamt of escape could become someone capable of crafting her destiny. But it would demand confronting fears that had haunted her of failure, of violence, and of trust. As she ventured deeper into this dangerous world alongside Marco, flickers of doubt encased her resolve. What if she wouldn't be able to rise to the occasion? What if her family paid the price for her ambitions? The stakes were incalculable, yet she could no longer deny the thrill coursing through her veins. "First step," Marco said, his tone sharp and unwavering, "is contact with my associates. They're not as forgiving as I am. You'll meet them tonight." A single glance back toward Michael's door reminded her of her purpose. "I'll be ready," she declared fiercely, feeling a surge of empowerment that had eluded her for years, but just as doubt crackled at the edges of her new resolve, the unfamiliar weight of responsibility began to settle on her shoulders. She had just committed to a path where shadows danced and secrets bred distrust. She wasn't only risking herself, she was risking everything she loved. That evening, as darkness cloaked the street like a shroud, she stood with Marco, a player in a game far more dangerous than she had anticipated. "Ready for your first lesson in survival?" he asked, a sly grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. The door yawned open, and with a deep breath, Grace stepped into the unknown, heart racing with the promise of danger and discovery. As the shadows swallowed them whole, she couldn't shake the thought, had she transformed into the architect of her own destiny, or had she just sealed her fate within a darker plot? Only time would reveal the truth lurking beneath the flickering neon lights. As they stepped into the dimly lit club, the pulsing bass of music washed over Grace like a wave, drowning any remnants of her apprehension. The atmosphere thrummed with energy, a sharp contrast to the quiet desperation that typically accompanied her thoughts. She was acutely aware of the intoxicating blend of excitement and fear, a cocktail that made her feel invincible and vulnerable all at once. Marco guided her through the throngs of bodies, his presence a shield against the jagged edges of reality. He moved with the confidence of someone who belonged, and for the first time, Grace felt that she might, too. Every face was a mask, their expressions revealing nothing, while her heart raced to decode the hidden dynamics around her. "Over here," Marco said, leading her to a secluded corner where a few men lounged, their demeanor sharp and calculating. "These are my associates," he introduced her, his tone clipped. "This is not just any meeting, it's a test. You need to watch closely." She nodded, trying to suppress the surge of anxiety that clawed at her insides. Their conversation was a flurry of clipped phrases and coded language peppered with laughter that resembled jagged knives rather than mirth. Grace strained to grasp their world, noting the nuances within their interactions, the smiles that didn't reach their eyes, a sign that loyalty bloomed not from affection but from fear or unyielding ambition. As the minutes ticked by, she found herself relaxing into the chaos, observing the way Marco commanded attention without effort. His charisma was both magnetic and frightening. He was a conduit of power, and she could see how others gravitated toward him, how they hesitated to breathe without his permission. "What's the first lesson?" she asked, the question tumbling spontaneously from her lips. The intensity in her voice surprised her, but she couldn't help it. This was her chance to leap beyond the ordinary. Marco's eyes shone with approval. She had delivered more than just a question. She had positioned herself as a participant rather than an observer. "Understanding your value and how to negotiate it," he answered breezily. "You need to find where you fit. And I always thought waiting to be offered opportunities was a foolish gamble. His words poked at the fabric of her long-ingrained habits. Could she really reshape her narrative? She had always clutched at the edges of her life, waiting for moments to be handed to her. But now there was a crackling energy that compelled her to seize this opportunity. The laughter from the group turned sharper, and one of the men, a towering figure with an imposing presence, challenged Marco. But what about risks? He spat the word like venom. This girl might be your weak link. The last thing we need is more liability amidst upcoming dealings. Grace felt the pull of those words, felt the impending judgment like an ice shard driven into her chest. She recoiled inwardly, but then a fire ignited in her. It's not about being a liability. It's about being an asset, she interjected, her voice steady and louder than she anticipated. Silence fell. All eyes turned to her, a predator waiting for the last shred of vulnerability to expose its prey. If I'm given a chance, I'll prove my worth, she continued, a surge of heat in her cheeks but with resolve firming her stance. I've done more out of necessity before. I can do it again. Marco's gaze flicked to her, a mixture of surprise and pride. The others were less impressed but curious enough to remain silent, the tension thick like fog hanging over the room. Interesting approach, the towering man finally declared, a smirk lighting his features. But ambition can easily turn into folly if there's no place at the table for you. The reminder of the precariousness of her situation was like a bucket of ice water dousing her newfound confidence. What had she gotten herself into? But as she stood there, a flicker of defiance ignited within her. She was no longer just on this journey for her brother, she started to realize the motivation had shifted. This was about herself, about claiming agency in a life that had long dismissed her potential. Then let us find out, she challenged, a smile curling the edges of her lips. Let us see where I fit. The night wore on, each encounter a stitch in the fabric of a new reality woven by choices yet to unfold. In that moment, Grace understood she had plunged into the ambiguity of power, the intricacies of loyalty, and the necessity of self-worth. As she looked around, she felt a sense of belonging growing within, even amidst the shadows, but the question hummed with urgency, how far could she push before the weight of her ambitions crushed her? The answer hovered like a reflection beneath dark waters, waiting to reveal what lay in the depths ahead. She would need to confront not just her external challenges but the pressing internal doubts gnawing at her resolve. As they exited the club, Marco tilted his head toward her, something akin to admiration flickering across his expression. Are you ready for the real game? Grace hesitated, a sense of gravity pulling at her gut, but she could only respond, I've just begun to play. With that, they stepped into the cold night, the uncertainty of her next move electrifying. What awaited her beyond the threshold? The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. The brisk night air bit at Grace's skin as they navigated the narrow, dimly lit street. Marco strode confidently beside her, melding seamlessly into the cityscape, while she clung to the edges of her excitement and anxiety. The weight of his question hung heavy in the air, its implications seeping into her thoughts. Do I even know what I'm stepping into? She mused internally, the fear of the unknown seeping through her bravado. The club had awakened something dormant within her, an unfamiliar flame kindling her resolve. Yet now, the cold reality pierced through the exhilaration. She had just thrust herself into a world rife with complexities she barely began to comprehend. We start with small moves, Marco's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. Tomorrow, we hit the ground running. I want you to shadow me in meetings. Take in everything, the details, the people, the tension. He glanced sideways at her. Can you handle that? Her pulse quickened. Every part of her screamed to recoil, to retreat to the safe cocoon of her old life. But instead, a steely determination cemented her stance. I can, she replied, her voice firmer than she felt. I won't let myself be seen as weak. He nodded, seeming satisfied. The way he studied her made Grace acutely aware of the stakes involved. It was no longer just about her brother's fate, it was about redefining her own existence, claiming her place in a perilous world where she would either rise or fall. The next morning came too swiftly. Gray skies hung over the city, the anticipated drizzle almost symbolic of her swirling doubts. As she dressed, Grace scrutinized her reflection, searching for the strength within the girl staring back at her. Today marked a turning point, a deliberate step away from a life defined by scarcity and dependency. She straightened her posture, a quiet conviction echoing in her chest. If she intended to play, she needed to be formidable. Arriving at Marco's office, a sleek, glass-walled tower that reflected ambition, she felt the adrenaline surge through her. The lobby buzzed with activity, an undercurrent of urgency that felt intoxicating yet intimidating. Marco ushered her into a high-powered meeting where reputations were bartered like currency. Seated in the corner, Grace observed, taking mental notes on every exchange, the subtleties of thought and power dynamics weaving through the room. Marco commanded the meeting, his voice cutting through the chatter like a knife. Each statement he made was deliberate, meticulously crafted. She saw how he played to both strengths and weaknesses, navigating alliances with a deftness that left her astounded. As her confidence grew amidst the flurry of negotiations, she began noting her own tendencies. It wasn't just about watching, she found herself calculating, analyzing. She understood the stakes, loyalty and betrayal intermingled freely, with each participant vying for dominance. It became clear, in this world, hesitation was a deadly sin. But just as she started to wrap her head around the exchanges, the meeting shifted. Marco posed a question to a rival faction, a standoff that echoed with tension. With every passing moment, Grace felt the weight of expectations tilt onto her shoulders. What would she add to this dynamic? Marco's gaze flickered to her, a silent prompt. "What's your take?" he inquired, pulling her into the fray with a simple, loaded question. She hesitated, the weight of 10 pairs of eyes bore down on her, the room thick with scrutiny. Could she add value or simply expose her inexperience? Drawing a deep breath, she stood, her heart pounding in a frantic rhythm. "What I see is opportunity to align interests rather than force conflict," she stated, her voice steady despite the trepidation clawing at her. The quiet that followed felt like an abyss, but then a ripple of curiosity washed through the room. Marco smiled, an approving twist of his lips, a subtle acknowledgement of her burgeoning confidence. But the rival faction's leader, a man with a steely glare, challenged her. "And you believe you can broker a deal? With no leverage of your own?" That question echoed eerily in her mind. What leverage did she hold? Grace hesitated once more, contemplating the brink of an identity shift. She could either falter or align herself with the storms surrounding her. Her options seemed stark: a mere waitress or a burgeoning strategist. The answer tangled within her possibilities, suspended like a secret waiting for release. "Perhaps," she replied, scrambling for footing, "but leverage isn't always about power, sometimes it's about perspective." The tension snapped, eyes narrowing with mild intrigue, the dynamics shifting beneath her. As the meeting wore on, Grace felt invigorated by her audacity but also chastised by the looming shadows of self-doubt. She was on a precipice, and beneath her, unknown depths beckoned. What had she just committed to? Yet amid the fear, the tiny flame inside her flickered brighter. With every heartbeat, she could feel the subtle transformation spreading, demanding acknowledgement. She had a choice now, and for the first time, it felt like she could steer her own fate. The question became urgent: how far was she willing to go for mastery? And what unseen dangers awaited as she ventured deeper into the labyrinth of alliances and enmities? The answer lingered in the air, fraught with the promise of risk and revelation. Grace left the meeting room reeling from the unexpected blow she had just dealt, her pulse still racing as the rush of adrenaline mingled with her doubts. She was no longer the passive observer she had been just hours ago. Each interaction, every calculated move she witnessed, felt alive within her, a roadmap she could either navigate or misread entirely. Marco's voice trailed behind her as he escorted her out, offering insights that tugged at her attention. "You kept your composure under pressure." "That essay start," he commented, his tone shooting a flicker of validation through her. The shadows of previous hesitations dimmed slightly. She was beginning to see her potential, yet the glimmer of self-assurance was soon overshadowed by a cascade of questions. How much of her past was she willing to shed? Who exactly was she becoming? She focused on the rhythm of her footsteps, matching the looming beats of uncertainty cascading through her mind. After a long day of meetings, she retreated to her apartment, the familiar chaos of laundry and unmade beds enveloping her like a beloved blanket. She leaned against the kitchen counter, clutching a mug of tea, replaying the day in vivid detail. Each conversation with Marco had layered her experience, transforming observation into action, and with each replay, her resolve strengthened. But doubt still lingered, a ghostly reminder of her vulnerabilities. What if she faltered in future meetings? The dim light of her kitchen flickered and she sighed heavily, feeling caught between the girl she had always been and the woman she aimed to become. A cacophony of thoughts flooded her mind: her brother, her current path, the potential consequences of her decisions. She needed to harness her emotions, channel them into something actionable. No more merely waiting for the right moment, it was time to create her own. The next morning, she awoke early, the city blurring into a hazy backdrop against the sharpened edges of her determination. Over coffee, she drafted a list, connecting ideas like a spider weaving its web. Each point represented a quality, a skill she needed to refine or confront: negotiation, self-advocacy, strategic thinking. As she paced her modest living room, a plan began to form. It wouldn't be enough only to learn from Marco, she needed to take initiative. Perhaps by volunteering for risky tasks, presenting options in team discussions, or requesting feedback, she could distinguish herself as more than just an assistant. The voice of doubt whispered that these attempts might fail, but the tenacity that had emerged within her hissed louder: failure could spur learning, and learning was her leverage. The day unfolded with troubling complexity. Each meeting brought new layers to the intricate web of alliances she was beginning to grasp. In one afternoon session, the tension escalated remarkably, giving her the chance to step up. A project had gone awry, and with critical stakeholders in the room, everyone awaited Marco's reaction. Instead, he deferred to Grace. "What would you recommend, Grace?" The weight of expectation plummeted onto her shoulders. She could hear the clock ticking in her mind, counting down to either triumph or failure. This was the moment of truth. Drawing on her preparation, she laid out a strategy. "We pivot quickly. Here's what we can salvage and how we can present it to the client to encourage trust." As the words escaped her lips, she glanced at Marco, who was watching her keenly. There was no turning back now. She had to convince the room. The silence that followed was a potent mix of intrigue and skepticism, but soon the discussion shifted. Her heart raced as they dissected her proposal, and while others debated, she felt a tornado of ambition swirling within. Perhaps she was meant for this world, fraught with risk and power. Once again, she could feel the transformation coursing through her, a profound and liberating sensation. For the first time, she was leading her own narrative, and the threads of her identity were weaving into a tapestry of confidence. But even in her triumph, she sensed the lurking danger on the horizon. The stakes were about to rise dramatically, and the secrets wrapped around Marco and his dealings whispered through the office like a toxic breeze. What revelations would unfold next? As she prepared to step further into the storm, a hollow realization settled in her soul. She wasn't just fighting for mastery. She was battling shadows that could consume her entire existence. The days that followed Grace's breakthrough blended into an intoxicating whirlwind of decisive opportunities and lingering fears. Each morning, she awoke with a fresh resolve, fueled by the electric pulse of her recent success. She dove deeper into her list, sketching out strategies and goals with fervor. Her coffee-stained kitchen table became a war room of sorts, where she pored over market trends and competitor reports, plotting her next moves with the meticulous care of a chess master. But as days turned to weeks, the adrenaline rush of her first triumph began to fade, revealing the scars of doubt still etched into her psyche. Beneath the confident exterior she was crafting lay a scrappy undercurrent of vulnerability. Every glance in Marco's direction felt as if he could see right through her carefully constructed facade. During team meetings, the stakes continued to escalate. It was one thing to present a plan, it was another to defend it against rival suggestions from seasoned colleagues. In a particularly heated discussion about resource allocation, Grace found herself at the crossroads of challenge and growth. With Marco's scrutinizing gaze monitoring her every word, she felt that familiar tension coil in her chest. As tension mounted, the team clashed over a critical decision that impacted not only the budget but the project's future. Drawing on her newfound determination, Grace took a deep breath, ready to assert herself. "We need to be more flexible," she interjected, her voice strong despite the uncertainty that gripped her insides. "Our current approach is too rigid. If we adapt our strategy to focus on scaling back while reallocating resources to core strengths, we can remain competitive without crippling our cash flow." She felt the icy grip of silence settle over the room. All eyes shifted to Marco, and he leaned back, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. While she spoke passionately, a flicker of doubt flashed through her mind. Had she gone too far this time? A murmur rippled through the team as they digested her words. Slowly, a colleague she deeply respected nodded in agreement, raising a hand. "Grace makes a compelling point. A slight shift in tactics might save us from broader losses." The commentary opened a breach in the fortress of skepticism surrounding her proposal. It was affirmation she craved, and the moment surged with hope. But while the team dove into discussions of adapting plans, Grace couldn't help but feel the shift in the atmosphere. Beneath the surface, a much darker undertow was beginning to reveal itself. Later that afternoon, Marco called her into his office. The door clicked closed behind her, and she fought to keep her composure, sensing the intensity of his scrutiny. "You're proving yourself capable," he began cautiously. "But be wary, this industry demands more than just confidence. It can consume those who don't understand its hidden dangers." A chill splashed against her skin like ice water, leaving her breathless. Did he see the apprehension behind her veneer? "What do you mean by hidden dangers?" she pressed, her pulse quickening. Marco paused before answering, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There are elements at play that you are not yet aware of. You're playing a larger game than you think." The harsh reality of his words plunged into her consciousness. Her new ambitions suddenly felt intertwined with snares she hadn't anticipated. Just as she began solidifying her identity within the firm, the shadows of uncertainty flared brighter, offering no promises of security. She left his office with more questions than answers. What was he alluding to? What dangers lurked beneath the polished surface of their world? She could feel herself standing on a precarious precipice, teetering on the brink of discovery or potential downfall. As the day folded into night, Grace sat at her kitchen table yet again, her heart thudding in her throat. She was ready to unravel the layers of her new reality, but at what cost? The stakes were rising, and she knew the next step could lead her deeper into a labyrinth where mere ambition was no match for treachery. Determined to understand the full scope of Marco's warning, she resolved that tomorrow she would not just observe. She would dig for truths obscured by ambition and perhaps uncover the darker motives that could threaten everything she had built. And in the still silence of that moment, she silently vowed to confront whatever lay ahead. The shadows beyond the door weren't going to deter her, they would only fuel the fire within her. As she prepared to clarify her path, a single thought gripped her mind. How far was she willing to go to secure her newfound power? And what would happen if those secrets twisted wildly out of her control? The following morning dawned brighter than expected, but the light filtering through her kitchen window felt distant, almost inconsequential against the storm brewing within Grace. As she sipped her coffee, the steam mingling with her anxious thoughts, her goals hung heavy in the air, each one a promise she made to herself, an oath to never let fear eclipse her determination again. Determined to sharpen her intuition in the industry, she dove into her research with newfound vigor. Every article she read, every conversation she overheard, was examined with a critical eye. In her digital notebook, she began cataloging not just strategies, but intricate patterns that signified deeper trends. She had to know her environment, Marco's cryptic warnings were haunting and she was determined to decipher their meaning. After hours of wrangling data, her focus wavered. She glanced at the clock, realizing she'd lost track of time. The workday loomed ahead, and she had prepared only half the battle plan she intended. Yet urgency drove her, igniting the fires of fear and ambition within her. As she raced to the office, adrenaline coursed through her veins. The atmosphere of competition fueled her resolve. Today was not just another day, it was a stampede toward accountability. Entering the office, Grace felt the familiar buzz of voices and clacks of keyboards, but her perspective altered. She was no longer merely an observer, she was about to enact change. Her first stop was to enlist the support of her trusted colleague, Jenna, who had always been a rational sounding board for her ideas. They gathered around a small table in the corner, Linda's dim light illuminating their discussion. This project can't stall because of bureaucratic red tape. We need to take a bold step, she urged. Jenna nodded along, her eyes reflecting excitement. If we push for those adjustments now, we can get ahead of the competition. Trust your instincts. You have a point to prove. Empowered by Jenna's affirmation, Grace plotted the course of their pitch for the project's next phase. The discussions with the team would be the crucible that tested her resilience against inevitable opposition. She latched onto her core belief that progress lay in adaptability, a message she aimed to convey during the meeting that afternoon. As the meeting room filled, an electric tension set in. Colleagues exchanged wary glances, an unspoken warning hanging in the air. Grace took her place at the head of the table, reflecting on Marco's earlier warnings but steeling herself nonetheless. I believe our current plan isn't sufficient, she began, her voice steady. We need to shift our strategy, to be more dynamic in our approach. The silence that followed weighed heavily, a visceral reminder of the risks involved. But instead of stammering under pressure, Grace pressed on with fervor, articulating her vision with clarity. We can't afford to remain stagnant while our competitors evolve, we need to reinvigorate our creative prowess. By reallocating resources, we free ourselves to innovate. Responses flew around the room like popshots from a heated debate, both allies and detractors drawing arrows of critique and insights. Yet amidst the verbal exchanges, she felt Marco's intent gaze upon her, a reminder of the precarious thread she was walking. However, this time, instead of cowardice, she felt determination crystallize within her, a burgeoning fire ignited not just within herself but among her colleagues. Their responses, once filled with skepticism, shifted as she confidently defended her stance, convincing some to consider her perspective. Yet, in the back of her mind, the shadows lingered, echoing Marco's warning. What might happen if she stirred the pot too fiercely? In the aftermath of the meeting, an unexpected call came through, an unfamiliar number flashing on her phone screen, contrasting sharply with the clarity she had just established. It felt like an intrusion, but an instinct compelled her to answer. Hello? She said, her heart pounding as she awaited the voice on the other end. Grace, it's Marco, he said, his tone suddenly grave. We need to talk. There are developments you need to be aware of, and they concern you directly. The air shifted, a reawakening of the previous day's foreboding thoughts. Willing to confront fear head-on, she realized she was no longer navigating a mere corporate landscape. Danger stirred in the shadows, and she had to decide, was she going to engage in this deeper game, or would she retreat, letting the uncertainty consume her ambitions? Grace's heart raced as she steadied herself against the conference table, battling the familiar sensation of panic. Marco's tone rattled her, it was the kind that teased ominous revelations. The pulse of the workplace buzzed around her, yet it felt oddly muted as she focused on the voice on the line. Why do these developments concern me? She managed to ask, her throat tightening with each syllable. There are discussions happening that you're unaware of, about the project you just pitched and your role in it, Marco replied, urgency layering his words. I implore you to be cautious. Sometimes, the louder your ideas, the more attention they attract from those who prefer to keep things quiet, the kind of people who play by different rules. His words hit her like ice water splashed across her face. She leaned back, her mind racing through what she had just accomplished in the meeting. The sense of victory was still fresh, yet now it festered with the potential for danger. The ambitious wave she had ridden earlier began to falter under the weight of Marco's implication. Who? She asked, confusion seeping into her voice. What are you talking about? Let's just say some stakeholders have their own interests, Marco said cryptically. Your push to innovate will only escalate their scrutiny. Meet me tonight at the usual spot. I can't discuss it over the phone. It's delicate. The line went dead before she could respond, and with a shaking hand, she ended the call. The adrenaline of her earlier triumph collided with dread. What stakeholders? Who wanted her silenced, and why? It felt absurd that mere initiative could attract such ominous attention. Yet, part of Grace couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just corporate politics. There was an undercurrent of something darker, more personal. She steeled her resolve and returned to her desk, her thoughts colliding in a whirlwind of determination and fear. This was her moment to shine, but could she navigate the shadows that now loomed overhead? Throughout the day, she forced herself to focus on her tasks, diving into the strategic details of the project. But the strings of unease wrapped tighter around her thoughts with every word printed on the page. She began crafting a contingency plan, one that stretched beyond the immediate parameters of her work. If the danger was real, she needed to protect not just her position but herself. When the workday finally closed, Grace found herself standing at her front door, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had to confront Marco, to understand what lay hidden beneath his words and the weight of implications they carried. The decision to engage with him was another potential transformation, a chance to uncover the threads that tied her to the peril she might be facing. She needed clarity, a deeper understanding of the stakes involved. As she drove to the dimly lit bar where Marco often met clients, her thoughts shifted from fear to strategic anticipation. Each mile drew her closer not just to him, but to the unknown challenges that might emerge from this confrontation. It became clear that the transformation she sought within her career would demand not just innovation, but courage and perhaps more than a little cunning. Upon entering, the ambient murmur of voices and clinking glasses swirled around her, charged with unspoken tension. In the dim light, she spotted Marco seated in a secluded booth, his expression a complex tapestry of concern and resolve. The moment of truth had arrived, and as she approached, a singular thought coiled in her mind. She had to confront the game that had now become her reality, and she wouldn't back down. Grace, Marco said, his eyes locking onto hers as she took her seat. We need to talk about how deep this truly runs. The gravity of his words hung between them, promising revelations that might redefine everything she understood about her ambitions. In the dimly lit booth of the bar, Grace's heart pounded as Marco leaned in, his expression grave. Your push to innovate is ruffling some powerful feathers, Grace, he said, caution lacing his tone. I need to ensure you understand the gravity of what you've stepped into. As Marco laid out the signals of a brewing storm around her rapidly ascendant professional life, Grace felt the weight of her previous actions settle upon her like a cloak of heavy responsibility. She had been clawing her way up, eager to prove herself, determined to secure a brighter future for her brother, Tommy, and for herself. But now, a darker subplot unfurled before her, laden with implications that resonated far beyond simple career ambitions. I've made my decisions based on what I believe is right for the project and my future, she told Marco, steel creeping into her voice. I won't shrink back now, not after everything I fought to achieve. The fire within her ignited anew. This was not just about climbing a corporate ladder. It was about freedom from the chains that had kept her and her brother locked in poverty. She was no longer content with being invisible. Marco studied her, recognition sparking in his dark gaze. I admire your bravery, but understand this: those in power will not hesitate to shield their interests. Your boldness could make you a target. His words hung heavy in the air. She was aware now of the intricate dance between ambition and danger, and she could sense her own image evolving. She was not just a waitress anymore, she was a force to be reckoned with. What do I need to do? she asked, her voice steady and fierce, underscoring her determination to turn this challenge into an opportunity for mastery. The fighter in her refused to back down. The maze of their world was fraught with shadows, and she needed to harness that danger to her advantage. Marco nodded. It won't be easy. You need to leverage connections and build alliances. Trust no one completely. Everyone has strengths, weaknesses, and hidden agendas. Learn to navigate the murky waters and safeguard your position. As he spoke, Grace's mind whirred, aligning each point with her aspirations. She had already begun to develop an intuitive understanding of the stakes, drawing on the last few weeks of experience. This could be her moment to truly cement her place in this world. Tomorrow, I want you to attend a meeting with a key investor, someone who may look at your ideas as a threat, he advised. Listen carefully, assess, and engage cautiously. This is your chance to pivot from vulnerability to power. Her pulse quickened at the prospect. She had realized that every discussion, every strategy she gleaned from these experiences wasn't just for her current position but for carving out her own place as an evolving leader. I'll do it, Grace declared resolutely. The fires that fueled her ambition had only begun to blaze. She would face this storm head-on. With every nod from Marco, she felt the cloak of confidence enveloping her more firmly, and alongside it, a distinct assurance that she wouldn't falter in the face of adversity. In the days that followed, Grace flourished within the silken threads of intrigue and ambition. She shadowed Marco, soaking up knowledge like a sponge while maintaining a vigilant watch over the shifting dynamics around her. She was determined to decode the secret signals and relationships that defined this lofty world she now inhabited. The day of the investor meeting arrived, and as she walked into the sleek boardroom, every ounce of adrenaline propelled her forward. There she stood, hatched from her earlier timeline of doubt, poised on the edge of transformation. In her sharp attire, her new persona burgeoned with an air of confidence. She was no longer merely a girl from the diner, but a burgeoning strategist ready to claim her space. Throughout the discussions, Grace listened intently, absorbing every layer of conversation. Observing how deals were brokered and the balance of power shifted sent exhilarating currents through her. Finally, the opportunity to contribute presented itself, and taking a page from Marco's playbook, she interjected confidently with a strategic counterpoint that reframed the underlying issues the investor was grappling with. The room fell silent for a heartbeat before the investor leaned back, intrigued. "You've got a good handle on this," he complimented. Grace's insides fluttered at the affirmation, but she remained focused. The stakes felt monumental, and this was more than survival, this was her ascendance. The discussions wound down and she sensed the investor warming to her ideas. A small voice in the back of her head nudged her anxiously. Marco's warnings echoed, and she knew she needed to win over the skeptics as well, navigating the fine line between ambition and caution. But with every nod of approval in the room, she could feel the threads of her potential weaving tighter. It was exhilarating. As they exited the boardroom, Marco's approving gaze met hers, and a flicker of pride surged. "You've made strides, Grace. Keep building bridges." Yet it dawned on her, this whirlwind of growth hadn't merely transformed her professional identity, it had redefined her entirely. She felt free, empowered, and resilient. The quiet whispers of her past began to fade. No longer shackled by fear, she embraced the individual she was carving out, a multifaceted woman who could thrive amidst adversity, fearlessly claiming her path while protecting what mattered most. With this meeting, she had not only proved herself but had set the stage for a future woven from ambition and confidence. As she walked through the bustling street, a palpable sense of achievement coursed through her. The echoes of her old life had faded, replaced by a new symphony of possibility. This was her moment, a testament to her growth, a mark of professional recognition, and a step toward a life untethered from past restraints. As the sun dipped below the skyline, she reveled in the promise of her future. She was no longer simply ambitious, she was the creator of her own destiny, channeling her past struggles into a relentless drive for success. And so, as she prepared for the challenges ahead, a newfound confidence blossomed within her, anchoring her resolve as she moved forward. She had emerged not just from her circumstances but had transformed them into the very stepping stones of her success. From here on, she would rise safeguarded by knowledge, ambition, and the unwavering determination to protect her family while pursuing her own dreams. Now is the time to step into your own journey of transformation. If Grace's story resonates with you, subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss out on exclusive emotional stories that inspire conquering adversity. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm. Your support is crucial to keep these narratives alive and thriving. Comment your reactions below. We want to hear how Grace's journey influenced your thoughts and theories about her remarkable growth. Don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You understand the importance of uplifting stories that empower us all to overcome challenges.